Hey, good evening, everyone. How are you doing? My name's Nathan. I'm here this evening. We have Elke Scholz with us. She's the author of Anxiety Warriors, Volume 1 and 2. She's a registered psychotherapist. I've worked with her personally, and I think she's done a great job in helping me build my resilience and tool case full of strategies that's helped me to fight against anxiety. So Elke, I guess on some of that note, maybe you could go over the 0 to 10 strategy.
Yeah, I'll do that. And then, so one of the things that we want to do with this program, so today's going to be a little bit of an introduction and as it's being taped. And one of the things I do want to encourage everybody to do is if you've got any issues, any special questions you want us to cover, there is a chat button on the Zoom. However, in the meantime, questions may come up is if you want to email your wellness coordinator, and then can pass those questions along to us. And so one of the things that we want to do too is always provide strategies. And we're hoping also to do this bi-weekly. And we're going to be starting at 4:40 and ending at 5:30. So, and then the other thing too is if you're seeing this and it's a different time, it's because we've recorded it and you can watch it over again anytime as a resource. So we're pretty excited to be doing this project, and of course it's a passion of mine. So one of the things that I start out with is giving a scale, and this is already a strategy. It's a 0 to 10 scale, 0 being absolutely calm. So what it means is no body disturbance. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're happy, sad, or anything. It just means that you're in a calm state. 10 would be that you're over the top, high, and the emotions, you're not thinking very well. It could be anger, it could be anxiety, it could be grief, but that's what a 10 is. The number scale isn't a test, and it's your own number scale. So your number 2 might be different than my number 2, and that's fine. The whole point of the exercise is once you start relating this 0 to 10 scale, part of the thing is being aware. And awareness, you're going to hear me say, you know, with awareness, that's when you can make changes. And then life is practice. So 2 words that you're going to hear a lot in the program is awareness and practice. And one of the cool things about the scale is that any child that can count from 0 to 10, once they learn the scale, they're able to relay that to their parents as well. So, or the caregivers. So it's a really cool scale. And again, it's just something to pay attention to. So right now, I'm just going to pause for about 15, 20 seconds. I want you to check in what your number is right now. And it's not something you have to share. So just remember that number for yourself. And we'll try and revisit that at the end of this program. And just so you know that I'm not expecting to be a 0 today because I'm excited and I'm happy to be here and aware. So, you know, it might be, I might be around a 2 or a 3. The other thing to notice is for yourself is when does it get to be comfortable for you? So just think about those things. And some people can operate very well with a high number and some don't. So it's just important, what is the scale for you? So that. Anyways, it's our first strategy, and we'll be reviewing that probably at the beginning again at the next meeting, just to give people a chance to learn that. So Nathan, one of the things I wanted to talk about was why I do the project, why this is important to me, and why it's so passionate is that I have anxiety myself, and I wish I didn't. So it's probably I think it's one of the most difficult emotions to have. And yeah, it's just hard. Okay, so I was one of those kids that had anxiety, but we didn't call it that. We didn't have a name for it. And I'm going to talk a little bit about today. Sometimes we don't call it anxiety, we call it stress. It doesn't matter. And I was one of those kids that when I was in the classroom, if somebody else was getting into trouble, I'd be in the back crying quietly and having lots of feelings of shame and thinking something was wrong with me. I also was a teenager that stuttered. I would switch words around, and I had a little bit of dyslexia. So I thought maybe the reason I had trouble learning English was it wasn't my first language. So, and then as I went along in high school and in my 20s and 30s, I actually had depression. And again, I didn't know what was depression. I would send my son off to school and I'd go back to bed. And when he came home, I got out of bed. And, you know, I recognize what that is now, but I didn't back then. And so it's one of these things that we still don't really talk about very much, and we don't share. And it's become a passion of mine for many, many reasons, is that I learned about it later. And I have a private clinic, and a lot of people that come in are struggling with anxiety like symptoms. And it doesn't really matter what age you are. You can be 5 years old, you can be 14 years old, you can be 20 years old, you can be 50 years old. It doesn't matter. And it's just a terrible feeling sometimes. And it became a passion of mine how to discover, to manage it. So I came up with 11 layers, which we're not going to deal with. We're not going to be able to talk about all of those today, but one of the first things that's really important is understand what anxiety actually is. And one of the things that you do have at your center available to you is the books and the kits. And I do believe that there's still some available if you haven't picked up a set. So any of the stuff that we're doing today and in the subsequent sessions, they are in the book. So, we're happy we have a PDF handout today that you can also access if you prefer something that you can just look at, a sheet of paper. So that will all be available to you. And we're going to do that when we do different activities and other resources. So one of the things about anxiety is it's the feeling of worry, of nervousness, and it's anticipatory. So it's something that, it may or may not be present in your life. However, it's something that we are anticipating, where fear is a little bit different. So here's the example. We live in Muskoka, and this is a true story. So I like to tell stories. I was walking on the summer road, and a skunk started to chase me. I'm not sure why. I hadn't seen it, but I did notice that it was chasing me. So I'm only guessing that it was near the den and I didn't know it. And I tried to run away. It was thumping and raising its tail. So yeah, I was afraid. And I ran through the woods. So that's fear. And it's natural, and it's important that we have fear, and it protects us. So now what anxiety would be is that, for a few weeks later, when I was walking the summer road, I started to get a little bit anxious. Was that skunk going to come out from nowhere and chase me again? But that didn't happen. So anyway, so anxiety and fear. Worry is also, it is negative anticipatory fear. So, and it comes from the English word "rygon," which means to strangle. So as some of us do have worry issues, and worry tends to loop. So what happens, it becomes very invasive to us. And so worry thoughts can be very repetitive. And fun fact, we have 50 to 70,000 thoughts a day, and many of those are repetitive. And if they were all different, it would probably drive us crazy. So we do have repetitive thoughts. And the good part is that's why, things like intentions, affirmations, mantras, all those work, because those are thoughts that we want to have in our minds. And worry thoughts, of course, are very invasive. And we do have strategies for that. So it will come up, and I'm not sure if we'll get to that one today. So that's worry. And so how can anxiety manifest? So that's an interesting question that I get asked, and it is really interesting because everybody's different. And Nathan, if you want to join in on those, but typically we look at anxiety as butterflies in our stomach or feeling jittery. But we don't think about always a stiff neck or shaking or nail biting or even having indigestion or a sore back. There's also hair pulling. There's things like sweating, flushed cheeks, and weight loss or weight gain, headaches, migraines. That's something I had as a kid. I had migraines and flu-like symptoms.
I know for one of the first things I notice is my heart racing, and I have to like slow my breath to try to help with that a little bit, right? So
Absolutely.
That's my signal.
Yeah, so racing heart and even heart pain. And I've had that before. And always, though, if you're not sure, go to the hospital, check in with the doctor, of course. And though it's amazing how this stress and how this anxiety can cause physical symptoms. IBS, like irritable bowel symptoms, OCD, insomnia, or even the opposite, sleepiness. It's just amazing how it can affect you. And I always say every body is different. So one of the things too that I want to bring forward in these sessions is that you listen to your own body. We're going to give suggestions. However, ultimately, again, it's about listening to yourself, because what works for you today or works for somebody else may not work the next day. And it is practice. It's practice. And the good news is that, I manage my anxiety. Most days are pretty great. And even yesterday, I had a wave of it. I don't even know where it came from. Nothing was wrong. I wasn't particularly overwhelmed. And I just had this wave of anxious feeling, and I felt terrible. So I just sat down. I had a drink of water. I had lunch. And I just kind of went through a checklist. And that's something else that we'll be talking about in these sessions is what does that checklist look like? And it is in the book, by the way. Yeah. And by the time I just had a little rest, it was over, and I still don't know why it came on. So, it can surprise us sometimes.
So, I mean, when anxiety surprises you, like, what is an immediate strategy we could use to help get in touch and calm down?
Well, part of it, Nathan, is the checklist. So one of the things that I mentioned is anxiety has a lot of layers. And one of the layers, and these are some, there's a lot of simple things that we can do. And here's one, and I've got water here, right here beside me. When we don't have enough water in our system, our brain will send signals to the body and give it anxiety-like symptoms. So one of the things that's really important is if you are feeling anxious or your number is starting to go up, that stress, and you don't have to drink a lot of water, just drink a little bit. And if that's the case, within 5-10 minutes, your anxiety is gone. So a lot of times we sweat when we're sleeping. So, I always ask clients, do you wake up with anxiety? So if that's something that happens to you, it's possible that you've been sweating all night and that you're dehydrated. So instead of feeling like you're having an anxiety attack or something's wrong, first have, a quarter glass of water. That's all you need. And if that's what the case is, it will be gone in minutes. So that's really been interesting, and a lot of clients it's really helped. And back to that scale, which I'll bring up is, for me, if I'm at a 4 or 5 or 6, that's already uncomfortable for me. So if I can take that down some notches, and depending on where you are with your anxiety, and especially with what's going on in your world, if we can take it down a notch or two, sometimes it makes it a little more manageable, and then we can get through what we have to get through. So if the water even lowers at 0.5, it's one more point that comes down, right? So it helps to regulate. And so part of that is also chemicals. So we got to be really careful about caffeine, even decaffeinated. Cigarettes, I know a lot of people say it calms them. It does temporarily, however, it robs your body of oxygen. So then you just get more anxious again. Alcohol is also depletes our body of water, and that's why we don't feel well, and it also can create anxiety. So it's so important to watch what you're drinking and putting into your body.
So you mentioned checking in. Is there a way to get a sense of more grounding other than just having some water and watching kind of what you're bringing into your body?
Well, yeah, and we can continue a little bit about what we're putting into our bodies. So something to really consider, and I always go to the physical part of our systems first, because those are things we can change. We can change what we put into our bodies. So, for years, I've studied foods and nutrition. I know I'm not a dietitian or a nutritionist, so that'd be a great guest to have. Um, and it's just interesting. We don't necessarily have to have an allergy. However, we may have a food sensitivity. And so, again, the difference is that our bodies may not be able to break down certain foods. I know I mentioned caffeine. Well, my brother can have high test coffee and fall asleep. He has no issues with coffee. So that's okay for him, but it's not okay for me. And I had to discover, I can have sugar, but my cutoff is 3:30. I just don't have sugars, and I can't have white flour because my body turns it into sugar. So those are discoveries that I've had to make, but that doesn't mean it's for everybody. One of my clients came to me one day and said, you know what, I'm not sleeping well. And I've been sleeping well for weeks, but all of a sudden the last couple of weeks I haven't been. And I said, okay, right away I go to, what did you change in your diet? And so here's the fun part. He was making a peppermint tea prior to bed. And, herbal teas, we think, oh yeah, an herbal tea, it's caffeine free. Well, peppermint is actually a stimulant. So he was stimulating himself with peppermint tea. And again, it was something that, was triggering his body. And then he said, and then I have a freezy, which I don't know if everybody knows what a freezy is, but it's one of those long, thin popsicles that is just jam-packed with sugar. So peppermint tea and a freezy, and then of course he just couldn't sleep. His body is trying to metabolize that, and so actually he hadn't considered it. He came back the next week, and I said, "How's it going?" He said, "Unbelievable." So it just took one day of not including those two things, and he was back to sleeping really well. So I think it's really important, to know that we also need our sleep. Right. And again, it's how do we build our resilience? How do we fill our cup? And if we're not sleeping well, then we're going to be down a few notches. So, we've got to consider why we're not sleeping. And is it anxiety? Is it something on our minds? That's possible too. And it could be food. I always look to food first. You know, what are you eating after lunch? What are you eating after 3 o'clock? Because usually it takes about, I think, 5 to 7 hours to metabolize. So that's why that cutoff. But some people, you know, they say, oh no, I stay away from caffeine after lunch. Okay, fine. Then that works for you. Just know what your limits are, and know, you know, maybe you can have a little bit and it doesn't bother you, but maybe if you have dessert plus coffee and a freezy, you know, it might keep you awake. And it's just funny. Wine has sugar in it. A lot of people, it helps them to go to sleep. However, because the sugar content is so high, it metabolizes and wakes you up around 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, depending when you went to bed. So, you know, those are just some things to think about. If you're waking up at certain times, really look at your diet and your habits. So, and that's part of the physical is sleep hygiene, and you know, just to pay attention to all that. So that's one of the lists on the list. And of course, one of the things we're going to spend a little time with again in some of the sessions, and that was today. What we're going to do too is just let you know what some of the upcoming topics are. And one of them is ecotherapy. And, you know, we're so lucky we live up here in Muskoka, and the community, you're in the woods. It's just such a beautiful community with rivers and swamps and lakes and lots of rock and forests, is to get back out in nature. And we need to be physical, we need to work, we need to walk. And those things really do give us those endorphins and make us feel better. And the connection with nature helps, again, lower our anxiety. So that's a physical.
Elke, did we want to take a moment, maybe go over strategy with everybody, and perhaps we could even practice it together?
Yeah, we can do that. Yeah, we're being mindful of our time. And I think one of the ones, Nathan, you had thought would be a good one was 5 senses. And so that's something that we can practice, and you can adapt it too, which is really fun. And this is a great exercise for kids. I mean, anybody can do it, and we can do it anywhere, and it doesn't even cost anything. So those are kind of my fun strategies. I enjoy those. So 5 senses. So it takes a little bit to explain. So thank you for watching the time there. So what we want to do is first, we're going to start with visual. So what I'd like you to do is just take a moment, look around, and choose 3 things. So you're just going to choose 3 things and describe them. So I'm going to give an example, okay? I have a jug of water here in front of me. It's clear. So we're just describing on a very surface type of description. So what that means is it's descriptor. So it's clear, jug is about 12 inches, and it's made of glass. So just describing that. And that's important because we want to just stay on the surface. And so then I'm going to describe my dog is laying on the floor. He's a fairly big dog. He's black, furry, and he has white fur and brown fur, and he wears a therapy jacket. And then I see a hole punch, and it's beige, and it's a heavy duty one. So, so just take a moment. I'll just give you some time, and you don't have to say them out loud, just to yourself. Pick 3 things and describe them. Okay, so with this exercise, we are doing 5 senses and we're doing 3 things. So it's easy to remember, doesn't matter the order. Let's do smell. So I didn't have all my prompts here, but we can smell anything. Actually, water has smell. So I'm going to smell water. And you can smell 3 things. And I have paper here. Paper has a smell. So it's just noticing, and again, you're just noticing the smell. I have brushes in the studio. Okay, so 3 things. Sounds. So I'm going to be quiet. And what I'd like you to do, because we do have sounds in our world, is just notice 3 sounds. So I have a fan that's running. It's very quiet. And I heard some paper crunching. And there's a hum in the air. So 3 sounds. Touch. So that's interesting, is touch 3 very different surfaces and take a moment to really notice them. So we'll take the brush, very different surface, skin, a fabric. Could be your desk, it doesn't matter, the computer. And each time just notice the difference. So sound, taste. So this one's interesting. Sometimes we don't want to do 3 different things depending where we are. And of course, for the purpose of this video, I'm just going to take water. And for my taste, I'm going to notice the texture of the water, the temperature, and the taste. So, and I'm just going to really take a moment to do that. And you can do that with anything. If you have a cup of coffee, tea, a candy, an apple, doesn't matter. Sometimes we rush through some of these things. So now I got to think, have I missed any? Sight, sound, smell, taste, and sound, right? So now what we're going to do is we're going to go back to what we named in the first place. So, and what you saw, so the visual. So just in your own mind, what you noticed. So for me, it was the jug, was the dog, and my big paper hole punch. So at this moment, I want you to notice your number, 0 to 10, and just notice if it changed. So that's awesome. And you know, it's so cool because one of the things I believe in is understanding anxiety. That already brings us down. And this skill, 5 senses, once you know it, it only takes a few minutes to do. It takes a bit to explain it, but once you know it, it's easy to remember as 5 senses, and it brings us back to the present moment. I'm with you, you're with me. Maybe we're in nature, maybe we're at home with our children, we're present. So the other variation, Nathan, you reminded me, is we can take one sense, and we can expand it. So if you don't want to go through 5 senses, it's totally fine. And I've done that actually myself, where you know, I was getting anxious, so I used touch, and at the time I used a paper clip, and it just helped me stay present. And it did help me focus. You know, depending what you have, you can, you can use any of the senses. And I actually, Nathan, since you reminded me, is there a particular sense that you've used?
For me, I always kind of gravitate towards touch. Often, I mean, I wear a crystal always. So for me, I don't know if it's the energy from the crystal or just touching it, but it makes me feel, my mind just kind of isn't focused on the thing that's bothering me as much, for one, and then it allows me to just kind of get centered. Slowly, it just adjusts. So
Right. Yeah. So great. And some of the topics, what I wanted to do is the next time we're going to meet is June 23rd, and it will be 4:40 to 5:30, and we're actually going to be early. We'll have some music going, so if you want to join in. And I know that today we ironed a few kinks out. However, this will be a resource, and it will be on your website. So that's what we're really excited about, because it'll be long lasting, and you can rewatch this. And I do really encourage you to send in your questions, because this is really for you. And if you've got specific questions or situations, I'm really happy to answer those, and we'll keep it private. So we'll just talk about it in general and make sure that we cover that as a resource for you. So next time, what we want to do is we will talk a little bit more about physical. We may just do a little review, and then we're going to go into some of the other layers of anxiety. So one of those is reality, and I can say I have a little time. I can say a little bit about that one. So again, it's about watching your limits. And when we have a lot of things on our plate, we can get easily overwhelmed, and we can get anxious. And one of the things is when our shelter, our warmth, our food, anything like basic needs are challenged in any way, will throw us all into anxiety. And it doesn't matter if you're a therapist, it doesn't matter that you have all the skills. And I just want you to know that that's natural. And it's not okay because it doesn't feel good. However, there's nothing wrong with you to have that anxiety. It's your system saying, high alert, we've got a lot on our plate, and we've got stuff to do. And whether it's waiting for test results, whether it's an interview, whether it's doing an exam, whether it's moving, whatever it is, somebody working on your house, whatever challenge you have, know your limits. And if you're past those limits, it's going to affect you, and you're going to have some sleepless nights. And I know I had a client once that came in, and she had so many things on her plate. And I said, if that was me, I'd be anxious too. And she looked at me and she said, I know what I have to do. And sometimes when we know that, we'll put up with those restless nights and just know this is what's on our plate right now. It's going to pass, and things will get better. And, especially to what's going on in the world right now, it's affected all of us. And it's just added another burden, even though maybe we don't want it to be, and we try to be positive, it's just always out there. And it adds to the stress. And I was talking to a client today, and they had been doing really well, and they weren't sure why they were getting upset again. And partly they were tired, they discovered, and then they had a bit of a heavy workload. And then a simple task like going shopping is stressful, and it becomes too much. So again, I'd like to leave you with the scale. So practice in the next 2 weeks, 0 to 10. We're going to review that a little bit. And, think about being aware, thinking about practice, and your limits. So, and if you're past your limits, just know it just may be a rough time, and maybe there's things you can do to change those aspects that are on your plate. So any questions, Nathan? Or
I don't think I have any questions for today's meeting, but I do invite everybody to make sure that send in any questions you may have. We want to make sure to address any of them and help with your personal issues, because it's important for us to be able to personalize this, so that we can help, right? What I have done is I've included in the chat an anxiety PDF. What I'll
okay.
make sure to do is upload it in any forms that we're going to have the recorded video posted as well. Okay, so you guys can download that and have a look, read the information, and hopefully it's just helpful in defining some of what anxiety is.
Right, and I think today too, just I just wanted to note, as if anybody did miss this and they're seeing the recording, there was a password or something like that, which we'll try and make it easier for people, right?
Yeah, I think the idea is for us to make it as easy as possible for everybody to log in without a passcode. Sometimes what happens is, because of some intruders, Zoom wants to make it passcoded for us. So we're gonna work around that and decide whether it's best for us to have you guys input a password to get in, or if we want to try to just simplify things for everybody in terms of access. So, okay.
Right. So thank you for joining, and also for patience, and for this opportunity. So